So now if we want to make our new component communicate with these two subcomponents, we have to do some magic. But why do we even want this? So basically, when we have this new component that consists of two subcomponents, we want to know if value inside of one component changes. And how can this new component, which literally just appends the subcomponent, how can it know that the value has changed? So what we can do, we can basically create a function like a callback, and we call this function listen. And this function is listening for a message from the subcomponent, and when it receives a message, it will get a type of the message and it will get a body of the message, which is like the core data. And then we can say, we can just, for the beginning, just log the whole message to see. So this is this. We have this listen function, but how do we get it to this subcomponent? So when we create, so this here we have a range slider UI. So this is one of the subcomponents. A range slider UI. We call it a range here. So here we are giving the options to the range slider, but we could give next to this, to the range slider, also a listen function. And then when the slider, range slider, here, when it gets created, when it gets options, it could also get this function, listen. But here we will call it a notify, because this function actually means that it can notify back to the parent that created it. So here, this range slider integer is a parent who's creating an instance of range slider and passing in the listen function. So the child, the range slider, now gets this function, but here we call it notify, we can call it whatever. And whenever there is a change, they can just notify back to the parent. So when do we want this to happen? So we want every time when there is a new input, we want to notify the parent, and we want to say the type is update, and the new value, the body will basically have a new value. What is the new value? Okay. So if we run this now, maybe here what we can create inside of the parent, we can just create like a new element, const. Let's say this one will be output or something like that. Document, create element, div, and we will say output inner text equals, we start with 0, and then when we get the update, we can just check if type is update. Then we want to say output inner text is going to be whatever is stored in the body of that message. We don't have to log it anymore, and here we can append next to the range slider and input integer also this output. So if we run this now, nothing happens. We have a 0, we do the change, but nothing gets updated. Why? Because in the input, in the range slider integer, we are requiring range slider version 001, but we have some changes here. So we have to somehow get these changes over to the component that is requiring a range slider UI. So how could we do this? We could now, when we changed the logic here, we added the notify function and we also added the function call here. We could now, of course, npm run bundle, git add, git commit, git push, and then npm publish, and we would publish basically a new version. And then here on the other side, we would delete the node modules and npm install the version 2, for example. But what if there is like a little error and we need to again change something, and then we have to again publish and again require? This is like a very, very tedious process. Therefore, when we are locally trying to develop with two modules, we can just use npm link and link them together. So next time we will link them together, and then locally when we develop and do any kind of changes, the parent component that is requiring that module will get live updates. And then when everything is done, we can then at the end push it to GitHub and publish it as an npm component, and then require the actual version once we know that this is working the way we want. But for the local development, it's basically nonsensical to constantly push and update and so on. So we have to link them. So let's do this next time.